Be seated. Each of us has a name, given by God and given by our parents. Each of us has a name, given by our stature and our smile, and given by what we wear. Each of us has a name, given by the mountains and given by our walls. Each of us has a name, given by the stars and given by our neighbors. Each of us has a name, given by our sins and by our longing. Each of us has a name, given by our enemies and given by our love. Each of us has a name, given by our celebrations and given by our work. Each of us has a name, given by the seasons and given by our blindness. Each of us has a name, given by the sea and given by our death. When my little brother was born, he didn't have a name for like a week and a half. During my mom's pregnancy, they chose to be surprised by the gender of our impending new sibling. So when we met him for the first time, everything about him was foreign to us. One day after school, my sister and I came home, and my parents were talking about this E.B. character. And I'm sure we, in an appropriately toned way, asked, "Who the heck is that?" And my mom was like, "Oh, we finally picked a name for him." E.B. is also my dad's middle name and the name of his father before him. In any family, we recycle and we reimagine the names of those that came before us so those names can live again in someone new. My brother, E.B., is such an E.B. And if you knew him, you'd understand. And I'm glad my parents waited for just a bit before they named him. It's also his birthday today. Our names and what we call ourselves, or what we invite other people to call us, are so important. We don't always have a cool story behind them, but sometimes we don't even know the meaning of our names, but they are our names. In today's Genesis reading, we encounter God, the Creator, or perhaps God, the first boss. After spending about a week creating the earth and all of its parts and pieces, this creating God, who made all of this out of chaos, recognizes that the first creature, this first person, shouldn't be alone, and he's got to get to work. Naming all of the animals. And what a first job. Like naming all of these little creatures that he's just met. This first person, Adam, as we know him, roams around with and eats and sleeps with all these incredible creatures made from the same dust as he is. And by sharing in God's creation and being in real relationship with these fellow beings, Adam is perhaps better able to pick names for all of these animals. We know the Bible wasn't written or even dreamed of in English, but some of those animal names are like silly. Platypus? Ostrich? Dinosaur? Luckily, we're spared a full accounting of all of Adam's animal names, but we do get to experience the power and perhaps the great privilege that comes with naming. Think about it. The Bible is full of names, naming stories, and even name changes. Many of the names that are carried throughout the Bible have deep meaning and purpose. As people who regard the Bible as sacred, we've inherited this tradition in which naming is deeply important. Names mark who we are and where we come from and even how we've changed. Renaming is also a part of this tradition, and it marks the foundational changes that we experience. We read about Jacob becoming Israel, Abram becoming Abraham, Sarai becoming Sarah, Saul becoming Paul. Our names, like our identities, change just as we change. The act of renaming shouldn't be as controversial as some in our society try to make it out to be. The transgender people in my life and those in yours carry on this tradition. Sometimes the names that we have don't fit who we've become, or better yet, who we've always been. So we try again, creating something new that fits us just a little bit better. What I want to call myself matters. What you call yourself matters. So many of our biblical stories tell us. It's why I'm always a little curious when we encounter people and characters in our scriptures who are nameless. And y'all know how I feel about an unnamed biblical character. The eunuch, the tax collector, the woman with a blood sickness. There is so much, and as much as naming and renaming is powerful, we need to also wrestle with the power of rendering someone nameless. Why do we do that? What happens when a whole group of people are smushed together and they're characterized by someone else, but they remain unnamed? What does that say? Think about those in the Bible. Aliens, foreigners, Gentiles, temple authorities. Think about some of the words, the names that we use today. Migrants, illegals, non-English speakers. After worship today, we'll hear from Benz about the work that she's done with No More Deaths on the US border. This humanitarian organization, as we'll learn, does the work of humanizing each person that comes across the border and responding with care and aid and support to our fellow human needs. I look forward to learning more from Benz about this incredibly important work. This community of faith is no stranger to the ways that this country's immigration policies affect the lives of the most marginalized of neighbors, our newest New Yorkers. But those in power dictate how our neighbors, how these fellow earth creatures, these aliens are treated or mistreated. We know this. We should know this. What is happening at the border and here every Monday and at shelters all across the city and beyond is all happening by design. We do not have to make people walk across the ends of their earth to find and feel safety. We do not have to have voucher housing programs out of hotels in a city with more empty apartments and homes that could be available to them. The policies that we have created and maintained, are maintained by people who do not have an incentive to do it any differently. The political will is lacking to change the systems that could treat refugees and asylum seekers as neighbors instead of illegal aliens. I know that this is a pre-election sermon series, so I'll calm down just a little bit. But y'all know it's not enough to just vote new-ish people into power. It's not enough to write postcards to the heads of these systems that suck. We have to change too. We need to be in relationships with people who are living and breathing this reality, and they are asking us and pleading with us to learn their names. I'm a Christian, or at least I think I am. I grew up going to church and did all the churchy things, Sunday school, confirmation, youth group. It's an old formula, and at least for me it worked. And here I stand working for Christ and with all of you. It's delightful. I don't want to assume, but I think statistically speaking, many of you are also Christians. Most-ish. The fact that you're here in this house, I think speaks to that. It leads me to that conclusion. And for those of you who aren't, I think you're at least a little bit curious. Who are these folks who don't like sleeping in on a Sunday, or at least like an early brunch reservation? What is it about this place, or perhaps these people, that makes sense, that works for you? The name Christian first shows up in the book of Acts, and it refers to those who are followers of Christ. It's a name that speaks to an action, follower, one who moves behind in the footsteps of. But our context and reality is so different from those early Jesus followers, those early Christians who claimed the name. We're not living in the first century Roman Empire, thank goodness, but we're different. It's 2024, and we're situated here in this place. What could we possibly have in common with Barnabas and Priscilla and Saul and Stephen? Do we even belong in that same group under the same name? How do we define the name Christian? When we accept that name and we use that name for ourselves, we also have to wrestle with the fact that Christians and Christianity has spent the better part of 1,000 or so years causing absolute chaos on this planet. The name Christian comes with a lot of baggage, but it also comes with power and influence. Christians having impacted our world in huge ways, and not all of them very good. But here we are on the dusk of not another political cycle and a potential power shift in our civic and public life. What do we Christians do? What is our witness in this time, in our time? How do we live up to the name? First, we need to acknowledge that this word, in fact, this country, in this world, in fact, that's weird, sorry. What do we need to acknowledge? We need to acknowledge the fact that here in this country, we have many names, we are many people, and we share the space. It's not just ours to run and manage and name and control. In America, we tell ourselves that this is a Christian nation. We see signs and symbols of that everywhere. A nation of Christ followers? Here are some of the top news or viral clips from the Christian churches this week, thanks to Religious News Service and my Instagram feed. Evangelicals for Harris anti-Trump Billy Graham ad prompts the threat of a lawsuit. Oklahoma amends the request for Bibles that initially appeared to match only the version backed by Donald Trump. Texas pastor Keon Henderson criticized for saying that Christians won't be blessed by giving to the poor. Jesus weeps. Are these Christians? Is this what we want our name to invoke? I despair. I hate it because so much of what dominates the public imagination around Christianity is not just bad, it's embarrassing. It is deeply un-Christ-like, and it's dangerous. Now, say what you want about Christian nationalists and evangelicals in this country, but they're actively winning in terms of getting the word out and telling people who they are. They've won the market. As I was preparing for this week and spending some time with Benz, she said something that absolutely tickled me. She said, we've inherited this minority tradition in Christianity. I like that, a minority tradition. True to its wording, this points to a tradition of Christianity that has not gained the hearts and minds of the majority. It's not done a great job of telling the story of the liberating love of Jesus that renames enemies into friends and strangers as neighbors. That message and that Jesus, maybe they need a better PR campaign. Perhaps better messengers and a couple more coworkers. So here we are. Imagine this minority tradition staff meeting. We're getting ready to take on the job. So let's tell the stories of our God, a God that got so close to this world and a God that lived among us. And the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen God's glory. And as Jesus, that God ate at other people's tables. He traveled both near and far from home. He talked to people who he wasn't supposed to talk to. And he made sure that people could be made well. He argued with those who were supposed to know better than him. He got angry at injustice. He spoke people's names because he knew them. Nowhere in Scripture does it say that he burned scrolls that didn't fit his narrative, or made life harder or more dangerous for his enemies, or worked tirelessly to keep people out of their freedom or fullness. He opened doors and hearts and even borders. So let's keep doing the same. What is your name? Who are you? May it be so.